My name's James Paton, and this is the final talk in this session about churchyard lichens that has arisen out of the work that the Churchyard Lichen Group has been undertaking. I don't need to tell a BLS audience about the importance of churchyards and cemeteries as a habitat for rock-loving lichens. About a third of the UK lichens occur in churchyards, and churchyards are the greatest expanse of bare rock in lowland England, and they provide a significant, if you like, museum of all the succiculus lichens in the UK. You've also heard about earlier about the work that was undertaken in the 1990s with the Lowland Churchyard Survey. The important thing is that since that time, the amount of recording in churchyards has fallen off significantly, and it's not possible to really properly assess whether changes have been occurring in the churchyard lichen flora since that time. So that was the stimulus to the churchyard lichen subcommittee being set up and to the work that it's been undertaken, led by Mary Steer. The other members are listed here. You'll also, I hope, have had a chance to hear Janet Simpkin's talk about the churchyard lichen records. This shows the churchyards where records have been submitted from across England. There are fewer records from Wales, and Scotland hasn't had a similar recording effort, and churchyards and cemeteries in Scotland are much less recorded. Janet Simpkin very helpfully put together a list of the top finds in the churchyard in the database recorded from churchyards of succiculus lichens. And that led to a project as part of the work of the database committee, led by Simon King, who took the photographs, and Sue Thomas, who provided information, and the rest of the committee, who sort of contributed towards refereeing the document to produce a photo guide to common churchyard lichens. Here are the list that was used. There's details on the chemical reactions and the difficulty of identifying them, and there's high quality pictures that can show what the actual lichens look like. This is where I live, and at this time I was starting to investigate the lichens that you can see on my doorstep. And I said at the time that I thought this succiculus brochure with high quality photographs would be very useful for people who were looking to ID common succiculus lichens. I've got my Dobson there, which you can see, ready to help me with the work. So my project was, the task I set myself was, using the new churchyard photo guide, how many of the common succiculus lichens could I identify close to home? Here is home in central Edinburgh. You can identify some of Edinburgh's key features. There's Edinburgh Castle. The Royal Mile runs down to what is now the Scottish Parliament. You've got Holyrood Park and the sea up here. Many of you who've been to Edinburgh will probably have visited the Royal Botanic Gardens, which lies just here. This area within the map is known as Edinburgh's New Town. When Edinburgh, as a small sort of hill town, outgrew the space that was available, then it expanded into this area, which was a new build in around 1800 to the period about 1830, when this bit of Edinburgh was completed. Here it is in the map, and so I decided to look at this monad with me living here and investigate the streets roundabout and see how many of the common saxicolous lichens I could identify. I thought I'd start by checking the records, and I contacted Brian Coppins, and this was his reply. Here are the records that were available. I get rid of my, I can't get rid of the screen. You could see that there was 3 records from the 1990s and then 2 very early records from 1827. At that time, Stockbridge was a bridge where stock was brought into Edinburgh, and the area beyond that would have been fields at the time. It's interesting, if you look at the larger picture for Edinburgh, here are the BLS records, and you can see that surprisingly there's a large number of monads in Edinburgh which have no records. That blue record, monad there is where the Royal Botanic Gardens are, and clearly there are records available for that particular square. So, what did I find? On my doorstep, here are the first 4 lichens that I identified. Lecidella stigmatea, and you can see here a thin thallus with black apothecia, which showed spores of the appropriate size, and an ascus tip that was consistent with Lecidella. Candelaria vitellina was not unexpected. I thought initially this was Candelaria aurelia because it's quite a thin background of yellow granules, but in fact it showed the typical spores of Candelaria vitellina, which has got more than 8 spores, so these had 12 to 14 spores in each ascus. There was Verricaria fusco-nigrescens in small patches, and one that's proved very interesting in Edinburgh is Lecidella scabra. What I've showed, so this had all the typical chemical reactions. It was K positive yellow, CK yellower, and it shows this. It showed the very typical KUV mint green, which I haven't shown here. What I've just shown is the standard UV picture that picks up the Psoridia and shows them up as bright yellow. A traffic island about 200 metres away proved very fertile ground, so on the tops of this and around the sides of it I was getting lichens such as Protoparmeliopsis and orbicularis, Phaeophysia orbicularis and Fiscia. This was a wet day, as you can see, and actually it showed up very nicely the colour difference between the 2 lichens. There's probably some Rhinodina olea up here as well, and there's a background of yellow lichens that I didn't identify in that particular photo. There was some lovely Protoparmeliopsis muralis with a very sort of translucent green colour. And overall, I was able to identify 14 lichens definitely. Tephramella atra I think I've seen once, and Lecanora polytropa, again I think I've seen once or twice, but I haven't been able to get a good sample of it yet, or do it. And what I've done here is I've coloured all the ones I was able to find in green. I was able to find 7 other saxicolous lichens to date, and I've still got some specimens to go through. These are the ones that weren't listed as on the common list. What's interesting is if you look at the saxicolous lichens in the photo guide that I didn't identify, and what I've done here is I've coloured these in, either in red if they were on basic or intermediate rock, which was about 15 of them, and there was 5 that were on siliceous rock. So Lecanora coniozoides, I think most people would not expect to find now. It was particularly prevalent when pollution was very marked. And these other ones, I think you would have been expected to be able to see. I haven't seen Acarospa fascata yet, and particularly I've not found Buellia athelia or Porpidia tuberculosis. Now, those are lichens I would recognize quite commonly in Saxicolous montane areas, so I don't think I would have difficulty recognizing them, but so far I haven't been able to definitely identify them. That's, I think, an important breakdown, because you can see that in general, the lichens that are missing are those that would be found in basic or intermediate rocks, such as limestone. And that's relevant because where I live in Edinburgh and in this particular area, this area here is very important, because in the period from 1615 through to 1995, it was a sandstone quarry that was used for building material for most of what was originally called Edinburgh's New Town. This is a high quality quartz sandstone. You can see that the mineral grains are quartz, and it was a very hard stone, and it makes a very good building material, and that's what gives central Edinburgh its very typical appearance. So it's a siliceous rock, not a basic rock. There's some other habitat observations I made as I walked around the streets in the area. The first one I would highlight is that there's algae everywhere. The second thing, and it's interesting because this particular street, this is the north side of the street, and here I'm showing steps on the south side of the street. And in fact, it looks as though south-facing sites are favoured for lichen growth. And in general, you find the lichens on horizontal sandstone. You don't find them in vertical sites on the building or anything like that. The other interesting thing is that they're in small circular colonies. There aren't large colonies that have filled up and butted against other lichens that, as you would see in some of the montane sites or down by the seaside sometimes. And that was a finding that was replicated in the Hyde Park survey that Mark Powell undertook before last year's BLS visit to Hyde Park. And he noted that there were also small colonies there. And he thought the explanation for that was that actually these lichens had really reflect what's happened as pollution in following the sort of Clean Air Acts has been treated, and the air has got cleaner within towns. And therefore these are relatively new, in inverted commas, colonies. They're not 150 or 200 years old as the buildings are. One interesting thing is how useful a UV torch is. I show you here the picture I showed earlier of Lecidella scabra with its ceridia showing up very clearly yellow in UV light. And if you use the torch, and I've taken a little video here to show you, and what you're watching out for is this color as I walk around. So there's a patch here, here, here. Another one there. So in fact, it was very interesting that if you use a UV torch and you walk around, it becomes quite easy to distinguish colonies of Lecidella scabra that would otherwise be quite difficult to pick out and identify, especially during the sort of daytime thing. So using the torch at night is actually quite an effective way to look for some lichens. What I've shown you to date is from Saxicolous lichens identified in the streets of Edinburgh. Now there are one or two parks, and this is one I had access to, and I've managed to find 25 of the sort of common species on the trees that you would expect to find normally. And that's given me a total, I think it's of 42 lichens that I've identified to date from this urban site. There's some conservation and protecting diversity threats that I think you'll recognise. The first of these is the power hose. So a few homeowners in Edinburgh take it upon themselves to get their stairs cleaned with a power hose, and you can see it completely blasts the stone back to bare stone, and lichens largely disappear, although in time they will obviously recolonise. The other threat that I've come across is what I've called the garden committee. This old bench had actually lots of lichens on it, as you can see. It was a little veritable sort of feast of lichens, but the garden committee decided that actually they should buy some new chairs. So this one has been sent to the knacker's yard. So what would I conclude from all this? Well, the first thing is I think central city habits may now be quite rich in saxicolous and corticolous lichens, and I would ask you to compare the BLS Hyde Park survey from 2025 last year. Mark Powell identified 75 lichens in his sort of preliminary survey there. And many of the lichens were, I think, similar to what we've found, what I've found in Edinburgh. The second thing is I think that the BLS churchyard resources that have been developed actually are a very useful and helpful guide to looking for common saxicolous lichens, not just in churchyards. And urban lichens, I think, are actually excellent for intermediate and advanced ID training. They're not very easy sometimes because they're not so well developed as you would find in, say, churchyard sites. So actually working out what they are, it can be quite tricky. But once you get your eye in, actually any walk that you go or any shopping that you do in town is excellent because you can walk past and stop and have a look at the lichens as you go along. And the other thing is I think the UV torch is proving very useful. Lecidella scabra can be found all over the monad where I live. It sometimes just appears as a sort of greenish crust, and you wouldn't really know what you're dealing with, but actually the UV torch can show up very effectively that actually you can see the Siridia going yellow and know that that's the glycan that you're seeing. Just to point you finally to where the resources are, this is the British Lichen Society thing. If you go to the recording page tab, you'll find there's a churchyard recording site now, and the resources for this are at the bottom of the page, and you can see here a number of useful things which I would commend to you to have a look at because they're really both very interesting and very helpful. So, saxicolous lichens in urban Edinburgh are definitely worth a look. Thank you for your listening.